Hey guys, kia ora, kia ora, kia ora. I am so excited. I have a special guest on today. Monica, thank you so much for joining me, sis.
My gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. It's actually my first podcast. So,
Oh, yay. Thank you. Thank you for blessing us with your first podcast. I met you. I was actually thinking about this before I jumped on. I met you through Nations in Business. Is that right? The Facebook group.
was it? Oh my good. Yes, I
Yeah.
remember where I had met you too. And I could only take it back to the event that we spoke at together. But you're right. It is from the Ninja.
Yeah, from the
Then we
Nations.
met
We
at
met
your
up.
dinner. We met at your dinner that you had for.
Yeah. So I started a Nations in Business page. This was when I first started my business because I felt so alone and kind of lost in business, and I just wanted other Polynesians in business. So we met through that, and then you came to the meetup, and we just had such great conversations. I felt like we were on similar paths. You were really into personal development, and so was I, and we were just like back and forth. And then from there, I've just watched your journey. You had Mon Made, which was incredible to watch, and then you moved to Not Your Average Candy, and it's just been so cool to see your family become a part of that as well, and really get to know you, see your personality come out. Like, it's honestly been so incredible to watch, and I think that's one thing that's really important for people to see as well, is the journey of the growth and how you go along the way. And I think you've documented that really well. So yeah, I wanted to get you on just to really, well, there's so many things we're going to talk about today that are so important. But if you want to introduce yourself, tell the people about yourself, please.
Sure. Thank you for that intro. That was lovely. So my name is Monica, as Leash said, and I am 30 years old, 30 and thriving. I am a mama of two incredible children with my partner Jason. My background is Cook Island. I was actually born and raised in the Cook Islands, and then when I was old enough to do high school, I moved over to Australia. Um, and I moved to Queensland, did all of my high schooling years there. Met Jay in like year 12. He lived in Melbourne, and so after school I did a gap year. I actually went to China to do dancing, which was like so random, for a year, and then spent my gap year doing that. Then I moved to Melbourne, and then I guess like that's when my whole life started. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
awesome.
and then obviously the business, like Jay and I, we own Not Your Average Candy. We started that on the 11th of the 11th, 2022. How many years ago is that? Like less than 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
After moving or closing like my beauty business down, called Mon Made in the lash and brow industry, which I think I had that for like 3 years too. Before that though, I was working in medical doing medical administration for like a cancer clinic, and that was my full-time job for like 7 years, I would say. And I started from the bottom, like started in a junior role, and then worked my way up to practice managing. And then that's after that happened, that was like when the whole business journey started. So yeah,
Wow.
it's been a whole lifetime, it feels like.
Yeah, you've done some freaking incredible things in your lifetime, and you're still so young as well. That's awesome. Well, one of the things I really admire about you, well, there's so many things I admire about you, but one thing that I really would love to talk about is the change from Mon Made to Not Your Average Candy. Main reason being is because I think a lot of people are caught up in, they start one thing when you start a business. And I feel this as well. I had so extra, I had sunglasses for such a long time, right? And
Yeah.
then people see you as that, your family and all the things. And then you decide, no, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to change. I'm going to do something else. And sometimes people really struggle with just changing, with just moving, doing something different, because people they talk about you. Maybe they tell you their own things. They're like, no, don't do that. You're doing so well in the business. Keep going. Like, you can do, like, keep trying, go for it. And a lot of people don't change, whether it's from their jobs as well. They're in one area for so long, and they're scared to make the jump to do something else, or they're scared to go from a 9 to 5 to a business, change is scary. And one of the things you've done so beautifully is like you had Mon made. I remember you were like changing your house to a salon and everything like that. Like there were renovations happening and all the things, and now you're doing Not Your Average Candy. So I'd love for you to speak on that.
Oh my good. Yeah, I feel like I'm so passionate about like sharing this side of things. And I feel like it all stems from like childhood too. For so long, the only way that I saw life could happen was like you finish school, you go to uni, and then you get a job. That was all that I knew growing up. And so I, my grandfather, he was like a very intelligent man. He was a politician, a policeman, a lawyer, had his own business. So I feel like unconsciously I had him, like he set the standard for me. So growing up, he just always ingrained into me like, Mon, try your best at school, like do your best. So I went all through high school like unconsciously, just knowing, just do your best, Mon, just do your best. When it came time, so I did very well in school, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And university was like, you should do university. So I actually signed up to do uni. I made it into uni to do a Bachelor of Commerce. But then I ended up taking my gap year and went to China to do dancing. And after China, I was like, I don't think like university is something that I want to do. So the next best thing I knew was just to get a job. And I started in the medical administration job. I was working in oncology, which is like for a cancer clinic. And I did it as a traineeship. And I remember getting like $11 an hour. But because I'd always had this like been ingrained, like, Mon, just try your best, I stuck that traineeship out. And I think I was getting like $400 an hour. I'd moved to Melbourne. I was living with Jay at the time. And so it was like a rough period, 200, like $400 a week. And we wanted to move out as well. So anyways, for that whole year, I did the traineeship. Years and years came along and I ended up being in that job for 7 years, made it to practice managing. And then this is when I had my children. So I had my daughter and I remember dropping my daughter off to school, like after after having maternity leave. And I just remember like it just didn't sit well with me, um, working full time. So I think like the first thing is there's like a resistance to go to work. And I feel like that's when things start to change, like inside, and there's like a pain. So every time I would go to work, there was this pain associated that I had to drop my children off. And it's something that I didn't want to do. So um then like I kept working and then I had my son and then the pain just like almost shone so bright that I just couldn't handle it. So during my second time of maternity leave, I and my friends said to me one day, like, should we do a lash course together? And I was like, you know what? I have nothing to lose. I'm on maternity leave, like, why not? And so I did a lash course while I was on maternity leave with my son, and we started a business together. And it was so fun because you're like doing business with your friends. And so I feel like that transition was easy for me because I was on maternity leave already. And then we had to go through the journey of like starting a business with friends. So that didn't last very long. We opened, got all the experience that we needed, like got all our clientele. We were open for like 5 months and then we closed because COVID came. And then I was still working part-time at my job while we try to work together for this business. COVID came, so I went back to work part-time. And then post-COVID, I thought to myself, okay, I know what it was like to go to work and have a business. So let me just try and start Mon Made. And that's when I started Mon Made. And then like move away from my part-time job slowly. So that's what I did in the background. Like because I had that pain in my head where I don't ultimately want to leave my children at daycare. And the pain like started to get worse when I had to drop them off. When I had launched Mon Made, I had to drop them off to daycare early hours of the morning. And then I think it was like becoming to a stage where Mon Made was able to support our family and I could like slowly leave my job. And then like those feelings of security, I remember not being able to have an income that would like support my family. And that was something that I had to work through. And so that transition from like my part-time job to Mon Maid was so scary. But it's almost like I feel the type of person that will do what is required of you when you take those kind of leaps, because I knew if I quit my job, it will mean that I have to make Mon Made work no matter what.
Mm.
Otherwise, the consequences, like I go back to work, which is something that I didn't want to do. So, um, this was also the time where I hired a mentor. And that was like another scary thing to do, because it was like I'm letting go of security and then I'm making this investment into myself. Like how am I going to be able to afford all of this? But
Mm.
I remember just pulling the pin and being like, you know what, Mon, you don't know. You just have to do it and then see what happens. So I hired the mentor and she was like, Mon, your business is already do like you can do so much in your beauty business. Like just do it and then see what happens. So that's what I did. And then like Mon Made blew up. It's like I felt like I was in two worlds at the same time. Like some days my head was doing work and then other days my head was doing business.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that if I just had focused on one thing, I would have so much time to be able to grow that in a way where the security part of having a job wouldn't even be a worry.
Mm.
And so that was the transition from my job into Mon Maid. And 3 years full time, I managed to, be able to be present with, well, at the start, I was able to be present with my children. As the business grew and I started to get busier and I started to, want to grow the business to a level that I wanted it to go, I found myself feeling resistant again,
Mm.
because the more I grew Mon Maid, the less time that I was spending with my children, which ultimately I just wanted the time and freedom, but I was seeing that the more I was growing, that time was getting taken away from my children. So that's when No Average Candy came along. Um, and that transition again was like one of the scariest things I had to make. Again, I still had a mentor. This time I'd experienced it before, right? I knew what it was like to change from my job to my first business. Now it was changing from one business to another business. And ultimately, I think if you know what you want deep down, you will make those decisions to go there. That's why it was so easy for me to do, because there were often times, and I didn't have any family like to be able to help raise my children with me. So there were a lot of times where every Saturdays I was lashing, like my children would be next door in the lounge room, like looking after themselves, and they were like 1 and 3 or 2 and 4 at the time. And I remember all my clients used to say to me, like, Mon, your children are so good. Like, they're not coming into the room, because I did have a home based salon. And I used to see that as like, yeah, they are so good. But then there was also a part of me where, like, man, that's all they know. That's why they don't come into the room. And that hurt me a lot. That, they know their mum is working and like I wasn't there for them. So I didn't know I was going to get this emotional.
Yeah, no, it's so real. Holding space for you, sis.
Thank you. Um, So that transition to go into Not Your Average Candy, again, there was that resistance because there was pain there that ultimately I wanted time and freedom, but it wasn't happening in Mon Maid. And so when I saw moving into No Average Candy, I saw like not having to have clients come into my home. So I
Mhm.
would be able to run Not Your Average Candy while having my children there, because it's all behind the scenes, it's all online. And that was like it meant that I could be more present with my children. It aligned with what I wanted. And then there's also the financial piece, because the stage that I had grown Mon May to was able to allow my partner Jason to stop working. So um, you could imagine that decision that I had to make to close like an incredible business down for this time and freedom, not knowing if No Average Candy was going to work out, because we weren't taking No Average Candy seriously.
Mm,
It was just a side hustle. Because to teach my daughter how to make money, how to run a business, like we were just like, oh, if we're sold out, like who cares? It's just like we're just Halia, like this is what happens when you run a business. Like this is all the behind the scenes things. So um I remember it took me a year for that transition from One Me to No Average Candy. 6 months of it was me feeling all the resistance and like just trying to push through it. And the next 6 months was like trying to prepare myself to just pull the pin, build belief in myself that I will do again what is required of me
mhm,
to push to make it, or to support our family like straight away too, because we just
mm,
and then so I had my mentor and she's like, just set a date. I remember setting that date. It was the 15th of December, and I was going to the Cook Islands like the week after, which with lashing, when you don't lash, we don't make money, pretty much.
mm,
So I was so used to um trading my time for money, and so going on holidays just wasn't a thing for me back then, because then there was no income coming in. Um and so I remember setting the date. I remember going to the Cook Islands the next week and just like heavy on my mind thinking, Mon, when you get on that plane and you go back home, there's no playing around. Like you have to decide. You need to decide that you need to do whatever it takes for you to support your family. So I came back, and that's exactly what we did. Jay and I had meetings. We set some boundaries in place. We set a lot of things in place where we just made plans that it's do or die. If we don't make this happen, like we have to go back to work. And
mm.
yeah, a year on, oh no, not a year on. That was only 6 months ago that we went full time into No Average Candy, and it's been the most incredible 6 months ever. And so
Yeah, far out. That's amazing. That's so inspiring. I know that story, you're going to help so many just in your story. And it's so funny how when you do just like let go of things, it's like it just opens you up to so much more possibilities. And it's like you're attracting all the things, right? Do you feel like now it's like this is where I'm supposed to be? Like this is it. This was what all of that was for.
yeah, 100%. And what I really learned with closing down Monmade is that I didn't build the business. It's like the business built me. So I can now
Mm,
build anything. And, it just, that was a huge lesson. And so even now with No Average Candy, I'm like, this is not it. Like
yeah.
there's way more out there. This is just going to build us to like more things, more opportunities.
Yes, I love that. That's such a great mindset to have. So, so, so good. So you talked about not your average candy, just kind of being like, oh, to show Halia like what a business is kind of what to do and stuff like that, which is freaking incredible. Like how old is she?
Just 7.
She's 7. So learning these things at 7, right? That's crazy. She is her like she's got such a great online personality as well. Like the confidence and everything she must have, that all would have helped her out so much. So yeah, you said that it was kind of like just a thing for Halia to do, but how did you get into like Lee Hing Moi? How is that, am I saying it right? Lee
Yeah,
Hing
it is.
Moi. How did you get into that? Because that's like
Uh,
your niche, that's what you're known for. Like, was it always set that way, or did it come about? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, so being born and raised on the Cook Islands, like I grew up on this powder. We didn't grow up calling it lihing mui. We grew up calling it Chinese powder. And so I didn't know any other name that it went by. I just knew that I love this powder. I grew up on it and I could never find it in Australia. So low key, I would always say to Jay, like years and years ago, man, if we ever found this powder, like I would start a business like the next day.
Oh,
And it's so crazy because when I moved to Australia, the only time I could really get the powder was when I went back home to the Cook Islands. And sometimes even then it was hard to get. So I just always knew it was just impossible to get. And it's so funny. During COVID, someone had actually started a Lihing Mui business interstate. And I remember it being like the best day of my life. I said to Jay, remember that powder I was telling you about? Like someone started a business and I can now get it. Anyways, they didn't last very long. I think they were open for 2 months. And I remember like my world just came crumbling down. And so the very next day, I'm like, if this person can start this business, like there has to be, it has to be in Australia somewhere. Anyways, I did my research. The week after, we found the supplier.
Nice.
And so at this time, I was still doing Mon-Made lashing. We had an online store at the moment selling eyelash extensions and all the lash supplies. And so I kind of had experience with like building websites, creating logos, like taking photos. So the day that I found the powder, 2 weeks later, we launched. In that time, I'd created a logo. I'd created like I built the website. I had like done all the pricing, and but yeah, we started it as a side hustle because I just said I have so much happening in Monmade, but I just already know like this is gonna be the next best thing, and like this will be
Mhm.
the perfect way for us to teach Halia how to make money, how to run a business, like how to do all the behind the scenes stuff, what it means to like go and make money. You don't need to have it, you don't need to just go and work a job. Like, you know, these are other ways that you
Mm,
can help her create like a future. And so, yeah, we launched. It was a sellout launch, and then yeah,
nice.
for a year on, we just were here and there adding little things to the websites, like trying to come up with little products, but not taking it seriously until like 6 months ago. So
Wow. That's so good. And you recently hit like a huge milestone. 200. Did you hit 200? And you're
almost 199.
nice. That's
Yeah,
200. What do you mean? So that's fucking incredible though for your first financial year in business.
mm-hmm.
How do you feel? Tell me about all the things.
Far out. You know what? You know, when you do personal development, I feel like 200K isn't enough or a lot, if
Mm,
that makes sense. Like,
yeah.
but what I realized was like I'd never seen this kind of money before. And I feel like I have been going through a journey of like what does it actually mean? Uh,
Mm,
because I felt like happy. I felt very happy, but I also felt like because I never saw anyone, or I don't have anyone that's showed that to me. I didn't know how to act, how to be, how to do with the money. Like,
mm,
and so I think it wasn't the money part that got me. It's like what was actually possible for us. Like if we can do those types of numbers, like
mm,
what
mm.
else, what more can we do? Or if we could do those types of numbers, like what kind of a life can we create for our children? Like what that this it's a like different level of freedom. So yeah, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful celebration, like huge, especially from 6 months ago, going into it full time. All the
Mm.
fear that was present, you know, it was like it just confirmation that like Mon, you know, when you really do what is required of you, like this is what can happen. Like this is the blessings from decisions, hard decisions, scary decisions, fearful decisions that you make. This is what can come off of that.
Yeah, so incredible. Congrats.
Mhm.
That is freaking amazing. How did you make it happen? Like what like you said like things are required of you. Obviously you have to step out of your comfort zone and stuff like that. Like what else would you say?
Man, I can speak so much on this. I feel like mentorship
Yeah.
has been like one of my ultimate pillars that I will bring this down to. And mentorship in a way where you get to surround yourself with people who set a different standard to something
Mm,
that you're not used to. Mentorship in a way, like not only standards, like fine, like talking about numbers, talking about, you know, how they like morning routines,
mm,
setting the standards of morning routines, because I feel like for so long I used to just, when you're doing personal development, sometimes you just do it because like that's what successful people do,
Yeah, yeah.
but you don't, there's an understanding of morning routines where like there's discipline in morning
Mm,
routines, right? There's like morning routines build something bigger than you. It's not just like getting up, it's like getting up when you don't want to. So then in other areas of your life where you don't want to do something, but you still get up and
mm,
do it, like that's where a morning routine like applies. And then what else? Like being, because in my mentorship group, there's like other women doing big things in there too. And I
mm,
think just being able to be surrounded by people who like are doing bigger and better things, like you almost see yourself in a way where like far out, like I can do that too. Or
mm,
other time, like there's also when I see, when I'm not feeling like I want to do something that day, when I do see these women get up day
mm.
after day to do it, like it helps me. So I think that's one important aspect, is like being in a room of people doing bigger and better things than you, and being the small fish in the pond. Like
Yeah.
not being like, okay, everyone, like not being the bigger person in the room like that. That's something
Mm,
that I learned, is I'm so used to being the big fish in the pond, but now I want to always be the
yes,
small fish in the pond, you know?
absolutely. Yeah.
What else? It's also pushing past like a lot of fear, and in a way where, showing up for content every day. I remember I used to go by what everyone says on social media, like post, like don't post too much or don't post too little.
Mm,
And I remember when we were starting Not Your Average Candy, I had these beliefs that like I can't post 2 times a day, or like I don't want to sell every single day. And
mm,
those little things are like limitations that would stop us from making sales. Like, but
mm,
if you want a life of like freedom, sales is where it happens. But
mm,
we're too afraid to like sell because we don't want to be seen as, oh, like, look, she's so like, um, she's just selling every day. Like, she's so poor. Like, she needs money,
mm,
or whatever the story is. Um, but I decided to strengthen that part of me where, you know what, if I show up and sell every day, like, that's how I can get a life of freedom. So, not being shame to sell every single day, every
mm,
single minute of the day, 5 times a day, posting, like what someone will say, don't post every single day, or like don't post twice a day. I don't care. I want to post when I want to post. If I feel like
mhm,
posting 2, 3 times, like posting. I feel like that has been a huge thing for us in Know Your Average Candy, like just
mm,
showing up. And it's not from a place, because I feel like sometimes people see posting too much as like too overwhelming, because like you got to think of content. But
mm,
when you're coming from a place of overflow, which I'll talk to this later, um it's not overwhelming. Like it
mm,
might look overwhelming from an outside perspective, but it's fun. We're having so much fun here, and it's just so easy to just like come up with things on the flip. And what else has been like things that have got us here? um Working on my relationships with Jay, because I feel like for so long there was a story that Jay and I could not work together. Like that's what we always said together. Like,
mm.
how are we gonna work together?
Yeah.
We live together, we work together, we raise our children together. But when Jay and I like really started to understand each other, make time for each other, make time for our relationship outside of our family, we just grew so much stronger together that it like almost came out in the business accidentally and
Mm,
unintentionally. And so prioritizing like that outside of our business was also a huge factor in like how we were able to get to where we did.
yeah.
And there's honestly, there's
That's
so much.
that's heap. Yeah, that that is heaps. And that's so beautiful. And I love that, like a lot of the times when people are like, how did you make, nearly 200K, and they expect like things to you to talk about money and breaking down costs and all these things, but you literally talked about routine, you talked about relationships, like you talked about so many different things. And I think so many people are looking at the wrong thing to try and get somewhere. And it's like, no, like work on your routine, work on your discipline, face those fears. Like, so I love that you talked about that. I would love to talk about your son. So you shared as well, and I loved. I think I read some of your posts and some of your partner's posts about your son who has autism, and I feel like this is such a good conversation to have, because I personally know so many people who do have children with autism who delayed the process of getting them checked in the first place, who really struggled with the meanings that, you know, they made autism mean all these kinds of things. There wasn't really much awareness as well when it came to it. So I'd love for you to talk about your journey with your son and everything like that.
Course. So my son, his name is Legacy. He is 5 years old now. And far out. So autism is like they call it autism spectrum disorder, and it's a developmental condition that affects like their communication, the way they behave, and all that kind of stuff. And so I had my daughter first and then my son second. And so I had already seen like differences in when we brought up our daughter and then with our son. And I noticed it from a very young age. So it's so crazy because birth was fine. Like my pregnancy was all normal. My birth was fine. Like there was no complications. And when I look at videos from when he was born to when he was like 1 years old, like everything just seemed so normal. It wasn't until he was like, I'm going to say a year and a half old, like when we started to call his name, he wouldn't respond. And so or like he wouldn't look at us. And so that was like my first red flag where I was like, okay, like there's something that's not quite right here. And I think at that time it was being spoken about a little bit. So like I had an idea of what it could be. And my initial instinct was if I don't get him the help that he needs earlier, like who knows how much worse it could get. So if he was a year and he wasn't even 2 years old, I'd gone to the doctors already and I'm like, guys, something's not right with my son. Like I need a referral. Give me a referral to a pediatrician. I need to go and like see what's happening. And they were like to me, like, you can't, there's not much you can do. Like he's too young. We don't diagnose that young.
Mm,
And this was 4 years ago, so I don't think it's different now because it's so much more common than when it was 4 years ago.
mm,
So I was like, so what am I supposed to do? And they're like, well, go to a pediatrician and then like just see what they say. So we went to visit a pediatrician and she's like, oh, he has like two things. So he would flap his arms and just not respond to us. So she said what they do when your children are between the years of 1 to 7 is they call it developmental delay. So your children aren't diagnosed until like a later age. And
mm,
so in that process of when they're going through like a developmental delay, you can go through the process of going through NDIS to get funding to start helping with like early intervention therapy and all those sorts of things. So we ended up going through that route, got NDIS funding, all of that stuff. And so now he sees like a whole bunch of therapists. He's 5. So, he's still in that developmental delay process. We did get a diagnosis recently, but it's like not 100% confirmed, if that makes sense.
mm,
It's not until they're like 7 when they're like, okay, like, yes, it's this bad or he's not improving. And so the process was very difficult, I think, um, because we didn't know anyone with children on the spectrum,
mm,
and there was a lot of denial, I think, for us too, because like no one prepares you to raise a child on the spectrum. Like we didn't even know the responsibility that was required
mm,
to have a child on the spectrum, like all the appointments that we had to go to, what was required from us as parents, like time,
mm,
energy, to be able to raise a child on the spectrum. And so it was hard. There was a lot of denial there. There was a lot of oh, he'll grow out of it.
Mm.
Or no, he's not, like he's just very slow, or those kind of conversations. But I think until we accepted it, like things started to be so much easier. Like, and I feel like for a lot of parents, like we tend to make it about ourselves. Like
Mm.
it's so hard. Oh, it's hard for us because we have to, it's our responsibility to like teach them. But what about like if we saw it from the child's perspective? Like if they could get the help that they needed, because it's just a developmental condition. Like there are ways for them to communicate. We just don't know how to do it because we're so used to communicating things our way and like thinking
Mm.
that's the only way. But as soon as I saw it from my child's perspective, like he can actually communicate to me. I'm just not learning how to communicate, like do his style, communication style. So, yeah, it was hard, but now I think we've reached the point where we've accepted it, and now that means that there's work required for us to learn how to best manage my son's condition. And he's
Yeah.
incredible. You know, autistic children are incredibly smart. Like my son can read, he can write, he can spell, he can count to 200, like he can count in tens, 20s. Like they're incredible children. And it's us as parents. Like we just need to give them the help that we need, learn how to communicate their way. And honestly, it like life is so much easier.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. I love that. Everything about that. And
Yeah.
it's so incredible to the work you've done on yourself as well to be like, let's look at it from his perspective. Like, yeah, it might be a lot on us, but what about him? Like,
Mhm.
that's crazy. That's so, so good.
Yeah.
Your kids are honestly so lucky to have you as their mum and your partner as well. Just from, I don't know your partner personally, but like from what I see online, from the way you speak about him, like you can just, it's like you can feel it as well, right? So, so, so beautiful. How can we better support people or understand people who are on the autism spectrum?
Yeah. I think there has to be like a standard level where every like the community is aware of it. And
Mm.
honestly, I don't know where to go and get that type of education for other people, but I just think just having this level of awareness for those children, because for me as a mom, like taking legacy actually gives me a lot of anxiety, because I feel
Mm.
like I have to say like I'm so sorry for my son, because he'll just go up to someone and take their food. And I wish that if I know now because
Mm.
I'm a parent of one, but if the outside community, if they just had that awareness, like it wouldn't be an issue,
Mm.
right? And so, yeah, it's just having just some awareness or like some dignity in your heart to be like, you know what, there's actually children out there. They're not just bad children. They don't
Mm.
have bad parents who haven't taught them what's right or wrong. Like
Mm.
there are actually children who need more support than a normal child would. And if I just like where's it's a human, like that's our human
Mm.
experience, like just to be nice to children. Like if
Yeah.
children come and are in your space, like it doesn't mean that they're being rude, like they're just children. And so I feel like even just having that in general would
Mm.
help. Yeah, would help the experience better.
Yeah. Such a good point. Like, just be freaking kind. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
honestly, that's
And the
all.
judgments as well. Like, just be open to thinking. I think having empathy as well. Like, I was actually having a conversation with a colleague the other day about empathy because, you might see people, and was related to the workplace, but it just made me think about it now. You may see people at work where you're like, oh, they're so moody, or why is she always negative and all these things? And then my colleague actually found out about that person's story, and he sat there and he was like, no wonder she's negative. No wonder because he learned about her story and why she was the way she was. And I was like, yeah, like it makes sense. And then we were looking at different people in the company. We're like, it make like when you learn their story, it's kind of like, oh, okay, it makes sense why you're that way. You've been through some hard shit and you're still navigating it and all these things. So yeah, now when there is somebody who might be negative or someone doing something that you're like, oh, don't do that, like instead of passing judgment, maybe just have a little bit of empathy. Maybe they're going through something, maybe they're learning, like, yeah, just be
Literally,
kind.
yeah, be kind, have empathy.
Yeah, awesome. What would you say is your biggest lesson in motherhood?
Oh, my biggest lesson in motherhood. I think for me personally, this one comes to my mind first, is being present with my children.
Mm,
Because you can be present, you can be there with your children and not be there, right?
yep.
And I'm very guilty of this. And I feel like it's because I have my business hat on almost 24/7 that I forget, like, your children, you're also a mom too. Like, be present here with them. Like, they need you more. They need you to lead them in a way where you're not always on your phone. So I feel like just being very intentional with my time with my children is just so important. Especially for the stage that we're at in business now. Like, it's what from what I learned with Mon Maid, like I need to not forget that at one stage I didn't have this time and freedom with my children, and that was something that I craved for.
Mm,
And now that I have it, like, to be intentional about that time that I have with my children. So yeah, that's my biggest lesson, being very, very present with
mm.
my children.
Love it. It's so beautiful. That's one thing I really love to see in your content and your posts as well, because it's something I talk about a lot. As a child, I felt like I wasn't seen and heard from my parents, like I felt neglected a lot. So then when I see parents out there fucking being present with their children, taking time, teaching them things, like I'm like, yes, like go you, like that's incredible. And I think it's not an easy thing, like you have your life to think about, you're trying to make space for yourself, for your relationship, for your business, and then your kids as well. You're trying to bring these humans up in the world and make them great people and all the things, like it's not an easy thing. So yeah.
It's something that takes time and, repetition over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. What's something you're teaching your kids that you didn't necessarily have growing up?
Oh, okay. I love this question. One thing that I'm teaching my children is that going to school, then to uni and getting a job is like not the only way to
Mm,
have an incredible life. And I feel like my upbringing was very much that. It was go to school, go to uni, and then get a high paying job, right? And I remember always being asked, like, what's your dream job? But not once was I ever asked, like, what's your dream business? Or like, and so and I don't know if it's a healthy thing because I'm like already communicating it to my daughter, like, darling, I don't care if you go to school and you get an F. Like, I just want you to go, you're going to school to like interact with students and like make friends and learn how to communicate. Like,
yeah.
I tell her that, and sometimes I think, is that the right thing to do? Um, because yeah, obviously at the end of the day, like, I want her to try her best, and I know that, being told to do my best in school also helped me to get here.
Yeah.
So, um, I think I just keep wanting her to know that that is one way, but it's not the only way.
Yeah, I was very much the same. Like, I didn't know about businesses. I thought only rich people had businesses.
Yep.
And then it wasn't until I got fired and I was exploring for the first time, exploring my options. And then someone said to me, why don't you start your own business? I was like, what? I can do that? And then I
Yeah.
started looking into it. I'm like, oh, damn, like, how
No.
cool. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you can do anything that you want to do. What has been your hardest thing about working on yourself?
And Um, like, there's a lot of healing my inner childhood trauma. I think that's like one of the gnarliest things to go through when you're working on yourself. Um, Unlearning things that I
Mhm.
had made up in my mind. growing up and doing, the other side of them. Like as an example, it was like one of the first things where I was like, far out, this work is incredible. Like working on yourself was, I grew up um where I felt like I could never ask anyone for help. So the aftermath of that was I decided to do a lot of things on my own, without asking for help, which is how I think I've come this far too, is because I never outsourced anything, or I always felt the need to do everything by myself. That's how I was able to go through school, because I was just someone that figured it out. It's how I was able to grow from, being a junior in my job to being a practice manager, is because I just grew up to do everything on my own. It's how I've operated in business. I just do things. And even when I got a mentor, that was hard for me to ask for help, because it was
Mm,
not something that I grew up used to. So yeah, in a situation like that where it never felt safe for me to ask for help. Um it's that kind of work that has, yeah, helped me grow more, and yeah, come to this. So yeah, the work is not not the easiest thing to do, but it is
mm,
most rewarding. And I feel like not many people talk about that, those kind of things
mm.
we have to navigate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's my favorite. That's definitely my favorite part of it, is learning how things in my childhood has made me the person who I am today, and not defined me in a way.
Mm, yes, so good. So, so good. I feel you on the asking for help as well. That's such a thing. But you can see, well, I can see from an outsider looking at you, being
Mm.
like, oh, you can kind of see you can take yourself so far on your own. You're fucking amazing on your own, so powerful on your own. But how beautiful when you ask for help and you get other people to come in. It's like, oh, that support around you, just people uplifting you together.
Yeah,
Because, yeah, you can do it alone, but I feel like you could go further. You could do more. It could be so much more beautiful when you have other people around you.
absolutely. And I think just seeing that pattern in like other areas of your life, like even for example, Jay and I, me asking for help with the kids, like that was something that was like
Mm,
turned a switch in my head. Like, what? I can ask you for help and it gets to feel nice and beautiful. It's not like I'm not being a burden to you. Or also
mm,
like those realizations were like, man, that's why I love the work. It's because it just unlocks things in your head that you just wouldn't see normally, and it makes life just feel so much more beautiful. And like there's less stress, like there's
mm.
less responsibilities. Like we get to share the things that we're going through, share the load. And so that, yeah, those are my favorite parts of doing the work.
Nice, that teamwork. Were
Mm.
you and Jay, were you both always so growth focused? Is he like on his own personal development journey? What is he?
Do you know what I think? um Individually, like, yes, we Jay was very good in school, like on his own. He just naturally intelligent. It wasn't until so he started a business too before I started Monmade and No Average Candy, doing cars. Like he got a warehouse and all those kind of things, and it didn't work out. So I think ever since that experience, that's when like the whole growth in business
Mm,
started. And I think when you get into business, like automatically you start doing personal development.
yeah,
I wouldn't say he's gone as deep as I have gone, in the most beautiful way. Like he's on his own journey, but I do like there are elements where we're able to share on a personal development level. But yeah, I think we're at different stages in our personal development.
yeah.
Mm.
Nice. That's so beautiful though when two people are working on themselves.
Yeah.
Like How fucking incredible, and how incredible for your kids as well, like to see
Yeah.
that as role models. Like, what do you think, just because we're talking about you and Jay now, what do you think is the most important thing when it comes to having such a healthy, loving, supportive relationship?
Yeah, one thing I've learned with like what Jay and I are navigating our relationship, because obviously it hasn't always been how beautiful it is today.
Mm,
We've gone through our fair shares of ups and downs, and I think being in personal development obviously changes a lot of that, but there's a lot of my mentor calls it like having the most generous interpretation of each other.
mm,
You know, and sometimes Jay will say something and I will take it not the way that he's saying it to me, and vice versa. Like I will say something and Jay will not take it the way that I'm saying it to him. And so
mhm.
just having the most generous interpretation of how we communicate with each other. And I feel like communication as well is, and that's so cliche, right? Everyone says like communicate in your relationship, but it's so true. And I'm not the communicator, believe it or not. Like
Mm,
Jay, I'm the avoidant and Jay is the communicator. So it's like me coming out of my shell to like, okay, like yes, we can communicate now, and like
yeah.
having those hard conversations.
Mm.
Um and sorry, what was the question again? I was getting somewhere.
What do you think is the most important thing to having a
Oh
good
yeah.
relationship?
And then off the back of that, and I said it earlier, it was like making time for our relationship, because that
Mm,
that changed everything for us. And like intentional time, not just, oh yeah, let's go on a date, we'll go eat and then come home. It was like, no, let's talk about our life, like let's talk about our children, let's talk about our business, like
mm,
let's talk about where we're going, and talk about having the hard conversations. Like we speak about that. um had a conversation the other night where he was like, I need you to be this in the business, like we need to improve this area in the business. And that's a strike to my ego. But when you're like when you want a healthy relationship, like I need to have the most generous interpretation of Jay, where he just wants us to be better, not like he's trying to attack me. So yeah, there's been those sorts of elements that have really pivoted our relationship and made it to what it is now. It's like that communication, and it's a work in progress. Like there's way more growth levels that we could go with our communication too, but we're on a upward trajectory, so
yes.
exciting.
Nice. I love that so much. I really, really enjoyed this corridor. I feel like I relate a lot to things that you've spoken about, the growth journey, everything like that. So I appreciate it so much for you like coming on and sharing, and this being your first podcast, and you're just so vulnerable with it. It's going to help so many women. If anyone wanted to reach out to you, where can they find you?
So you can find us on Instagram at Not Your Average Candy, or on TikTok at Not Your Average Candy. But Instagram is our main social media platform that we use.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
Oh, thanks for having
And
me. Oh my
of
gosh.
course.
I love that. I love this conversation. I love everything about what your platform. I've been listening to it's like your podcast since it first started actually.
Oh,
And yeah, I just love it. I love what you're doing in the community. I love how you're impacting women. I love that you transition from, going from products to going from So Extra to the Real Polynesian Life Coach, and I love it. It's the best.
thank you, sis. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're